Then came the 4th of July weekend. It had always been a huge family celebration for us, a big backyard barbecue with all the kids and grandkids, ending with the town fireworks display over the lake. That year, the thought filled me with dread, but Walt insisted. "We have to keep up appearances, Ellie," he had said, the only time he had addressed the situation directly. The family started arriving around noon. Tiffany and her husband David with my granddaughters Zoe and Kayla, then Marcus and his wife Olivia. I put on a brave face, forcing a smile, hugging my grandkids, but I could feel a strange tension in the air. Everyone seemed to be walking on eggshells around me. After lunch, as I was clearing the table, Tiffany came up and put a hand on my arm. "Mom," she said, her voice serious, "we all need to talk in the living room." A cold knot of fear formed in my stomach. I followed her to the living room where everyone was gathered. Walt was sitting in his favorite armchair, looking grim. The kids were arranged on the couches. It felt staged. It felt like an ambush. I sat down, my hands trembling in my lap. Tiffany took a deep breath. "Mom," she started, choosing her words carefully. "Dad told us what's going on." I stared at her speechless. He had told them. He had framed the narrative, told his version of the story before I had a chance to speak. "He told us about Chelsea," she continued, "and about your issues. The fact that you two, well, that you can't be a wife to him that way anymore." The room started spinning. My issues. They were calling my chronic debilitating pain my issues. I looked at Walt, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. I looked at my son Marcus. He was staring at the floor. "So what is this?" I managed to say, my voice choked. "An intervention? Are you all here to tell me I'm not doing enough for your father?" "No, Mom, of course not," Tiffany said quickly, though her tone was condescending. "We're just saying you have to be realistic. Dad has needs, and if you can't meet them, isn't it better that he finds a discreet way to take care of them rather than, getting a divorce and tearing the family apart?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked around the room, searching for an ally, a single person who saw the insanity of this. "So you all agree with this? You think it's okay for your father to have an affair?" Tiffany sighed. "We're not saying it's right, Mom. We're just saying it's a practical solution. It doesn't have to affect anyone. He gets what he needs, and the family stays together. It's better for everyone." I turned to my son. "Marcus, do you agree with this?" He finally looked up, his face expressionless. "It helps Dad, Mom," he said quietly. "He's been really unhappy." I looked at my daughter-in-law, Olivia. She looked deeply uncomfortable. "As long as it's discreet," she muttered, twisting her hands. My last hope was my granddaughters, Zoe and Kayla, my sweet girls. They were teenagers, part of a different generation. Maybe they would see it. "What about you girls?" I asked, my voice pleading. Zoe, the eldest, exchanged a look with her mother, who gave her a slight nod. "Well, Grandma," she said hesitantly, "a lot of our friends' parents have open relationships. They say it's not a big deal. It's just sex, right? It's just sex." The words echoed in the silent room. My own family, my children and grandchildren were sitting here in my house, telling me to accept my husband's infidelity as a matter of practicality. They had completely taken his side. They had chosen his desires over my dignity. In that moment, I had never felt so utterly alone, so completely betrayed. I felt like an old piece of furniture, something they kept for sentimental reasons, but which no longer served a useful purpose. I stood up, my legs shaking. "I see," I said. My voice was flat. "The majority rules. He'll get what he wants." I turned to leave the room to escape their pitying, judging eyes. As I reached the door, Walt called my name. "Eleanor." For a second, foolish and hopeful, I thought he might reconsider, that he might see the monstrous thing he had done. I turned back. He looked at me, his face serious. "Can I tell Chelsea you were kidding about calling the police?" It really scared her. The last remaining piece of my heart shattered. I didn't answer. I simply walked out of the room, through the back door, and into the backyard. A few minutes later, I heard cheers from the living room. I looked through the window and saw them. My family was hugging Walt, patting him on the back. They were celebrating his victory, celebrating the successful negotiation of my surrender. And through the window, I could see my husband, my partner of 40 years, already pulling out his phone, a smirk spreading across his face as he called his mistress with the good news. After that day, the 4th of July, a terrible new normal settled over our house. It was the quiet, polite hell of a marriage that was dead, but not yet buried. The affair was no longer a secret to hide, but a fact to manage. Walt made no effort to be discreet. I knew that every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, while I was at my physical therapy appointments, Chelsea came over. I knew because I could smell her perfume lingering in the air when I got home. I started finding long blonde hairs on the sofa cushions. Once I even found an earring, a cheap, sparkly thing tucked into the side of his armchair. I picked it up with 2 fingers, looked at it for a long moment, and then dropped it in the trash can. What was there to say? I had been outvoted. The family treated the situation with a chilling sense of normalcy. When they called, they'd ask, "How are you and Dad doing?" As if nothing had changed. Tiffany in particular seemed to think she had engineered a brilliant compromise. One afternoon, she stopped by with some groceries for me. As I put them away, she said in a bright, cheerful voice, "You know, Mom, I'm really proud of you." I stopped what I was doing and stared at her. "Proud of me? Why?" "For being so understanding," she said, completely serious. "For putting Dad's happiness first. It shows how much you love him. Letting him do this. Letting him." The word hung in the air between us as if I had given my permission. As if it were a generous gift I had bestowed instead of a betrayal that was tearing me apart day by day. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in my chest. "Tiffany," I said, my voice low and steady, "this is the last time we will ever speak of this. The very last time. Do you understand me?" She was surprised by my tone, but nodded. "Sure, Mom, I get it. It's hard to move past if people keep bringing it up." She had no idea. She thought my problem was a matter of forgetting, not a wound that was festering at the heart of our family. I began to isolate myself, not just from Walt, but from everyone. I became an observer of my own life. I cooked, I cleaned, I went to my appointments. I built a wall around myself, painful brick by painful brick. On weekends, Walt would be home. We'd eat dinner together talking about meaningless things. The weather, the news, what the grandkids were doing. He'd try to be affectionate sometimes, a hand on my shoulder, a compliment about the meal. It was all an act, a way to quiet his own conscience. I rarely reciprocated. The well of affection I once had for him had run dry. To cope, I started spending entire days out of the house, especially Saturdays. I told Walt I'd joined a new art class or was volunteering at the hospital. In reality, I just drove. I drove for hours with no destination in mind. I'd find a quiet diner in a small town I'd never seen before, and sit for hours over a cup of coffee just watching people live their ordinary lives. I went to the movies and saw film after film, losing myself in other people's stories because my own had become unbearable. These long absences didn't seem to bother Walt. In fact, he seemed to prefer it. It gave him an empty house, a clear schedule. I knew what happened while I was gone. The house was his, the bed was his, and Chelsea was with him. The thought was a dull, constant ache. But something strange started happening during those long, lonely drives. The hurt slowly began to congeal into something else, something colder, sharper. It was determination. I realized that everyone saw me as a frail, weak-old woman who had no choice but to accept her fate. They thought my silence was surrender. They were wrong. My silence was my planning. My silence was my biding my time. My silence was my preparation for war. The months crawled by. The vibrant colors of fall faded into the cold gray of winter. Our house, once filled with the warmth of a long life shared, now felt like a cold, empty museum. Walt and I were polite strangers, coexisting in a space that no longer felt like a home. He continued his arrangement with Chelsea, and I continued my weekend escapes, fortifying the walls around my heart. Then came Christmas Eve. The holiday I once loved, a day of gratitude and family, now felt like a looming threat. I went through the motions, ordering a turkey, planning the menu. I did it for the grandkids, I told myself. A few days before the holiday, Tiffany called. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice overly cheerful. "Just confirming the plan for Thursday. We'll be there around 1. And hey, Dad had a great idea. He wants to invite someone. I froze, the phone cold against my ear. An invitee? I asked, already knowing the answer. Who? There was a slight hesitation. Well, it's Chelsea, she said, trying to sound casual. Dad says she doesn't have family in town and he didn't want her to be alone on Christmas Eve. I was speechless. The absolute mind-boggling nerve of it to bring his mistress, the woman who was a wrecking ball to our marriage, to my table at a family holiday. It wasn't just an insult. It was a statement. It was them saying Chelsea was no longer just a dirty little secret. She was being promoted. She was becoming part of the family. No, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Mom, don't be like that, Tiffany began, her tone shifting to one of exasperation. It's just dinner. It's the Christian thing to do. It's Christmas Eve. I told you I wouldn't be in the same room as that woman, Tiffany, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. I will not have her in my house, sitting at my table, eating the food I cooked. That is not happening. This is Dad's house too, Mom, she countered. He has a right to invite who he wants. I expect you to be civil. Be civil? Like a naughty child being scolded. After I hung up, I walked into the living room where Walt was watching TV. You invited her, I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't even turn to look at me. It's just dinner, Eleanor. Grow up. That was it. That was the moment something inside me finally irrevocably broke. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply turned and walked away. On Christmas Eve morning, I woke up early. I didn't prepare a turkey. I didn't prepare any side dishes. I got dressed, went into the kitchen, and made myself a single piece of toast. As the family began to arrive, filling the house with their cheerful chatter, I walked to the garage, got into my car, and drove away. I drove to a truck stop diner off the interstate. I sat at a table alone and ordered their Christmas special. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, all served on one melamine plate. I ate slowly, watching the families around me laugh and talk. I wasn't sad. I was numb. After my meal, I went to a movie theater and saw 3 films back to back. I didn't even care what they were about. I just needed to be somewhere else. I got home around 11 at night. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room. Walt was sitting there waiting for me. The remains of the feast were still on the dining room table. Where have you been? He demanded, his voice sharp. I went to a truck stop for Christmas Eve dinner, I replied calmly, setting down my purse. Then I saw a couple of movies. He stared at me, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. We had a wonderful meal right here and you went to a truck stop. Why would you do that? I finally looked him straight in the eye. It's not about the food, Walt, I said. My voice was cold as ice. It's about the company. I told you I would not be in this house at the same time as her. That didn't just mean when she came to visit on a Tuesday afternoon. It meant any time, and you knew it, and you did it anyway. He stood up, his face red with anger. I can't believe a woman your age can't be civilized to a guest I invited into our home. She is not a guest, I said. She is the woman you are cheating on me with. I picked up the newspaper from the side table, opened it, and held it between us. A fragile wall that signified the end of conversation and the end of everything else. The winter after that disastrous Christmas was long and bleak, both outside and inside our home. The courtesy between Walt and me had worn thin, replaced by a brittle silence. We were 2 ships passing in the night, living in the same space, but in completely different worlds. He had his life, which I now knew included not just Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, but also dinners and outings with Chelsea. My life consisted of my appointments, my solitary drives, and my secret planning. My attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Chen, had been very clear. Eleanor, she had said, we need to be meticulous. We document everything. We move slowly and quietly. So I did. I began gathering bank statements, property deeds, and investment portfolio reports. Walt had always handled the finances, but I was a quick study. I spent hours at the library learning about asset division and divorce law. The quiet librarian was turning into a financial strategist. Spring arrived, and with it, Mother's Day. For years, we had a family tradition. The kids would take me to a fancy brunch at a beautiful downtown French restaurant. By mutual agreement, Walt didn't come to my Mother's Day brunch, and I didn't go to his Father's Day celebration. It was the kids' day with each parent, and it had always worked for us. This year, however, a dark suspicion took root in my mind. Given what had happened on Christmas, I couldn't shake the feeling that Walt would see my absence as an opportunity. The day before Mother's Day, Tiffany called to confirm. "We'll pick you up at 11, Mom. So excited," she chirped. "Actually, honey," I said, forcing a weak, hesitant tone into my voice, "I don't think I'm up for it this year. My arthritis is killing me. You guys go and have a wonderful time without me. Just call me later." There was a pause. "Oh, okay. Mom?" Tiffany said a little too quickly. "If you're sure, we'll miss you." I knew she was lying. My absence wasn't a disappointment. It was a convenience. On Mother's Day morning, I watched from my bedroom window as Tiffany's minivan arrived, followed by Marcus and Olivia's car. They all went inside to collect Walt. A few minutes later, they all emerged, laughing and piling into the cars, heading downtown to the restaurant. I waited 20 minutes, then got into my own car. I didn't dress up. I just wore simple slacks and a blouse. I drove to the French restaurant. I didn't plan to go in. I just needed to know. I parked across the street where I had a clear view of the entrance and the parking lot. I watched my family arrive. I saw my son Marcus hold the door for my daughter Tiffany. I saw my husband Walt laughing, looking happier than I had seen him in years. And then another car pulled into the lot, the small, sporty red convertible. My breath caught. Chelsea got out of the car wearing a pretty floral dress. She walked up to my family and my daughter Tiffany gave her a hug. A warm, welcoming hug. My son-in-law David smiled and nodded. My husband Walt slipped his arm around her waist and kissed her on the cheek. And then, all together, my entire family with my husband's mistress in tow walked into the restaurant to celebrate Mother's Day without me. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The pain in my joints was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. But this pain was different. It wasn't the searing pain I felt when I first discovered the affair. It wasn't the humiliated despair I felt during the family intervention. It was a cold, clarifying rage. This was the final betrayal. It was them, all of them, erasing me. They hadn't just replaced me in my husband's bed. They were replacing me at the family table. Any sliver of doubt left, any thought that maybe this could be fixed, that my family could be saved, vanished in that moment. It was over. I didn't cry. I simply put the car in drive and pulled away. I didn't go to a truck stop or a movie theater. I drove straight home. I walked into my home office and called Ms. Chen. "It's time," I said when she answered. "We're moving forward with the final plan." The year that followed that Mother's Day was the strangest of my life. On the surface, I was the picture of quiet resignation. I became even more compliant, more docile. I stopped my weekend drives. I started asking Walt about his day, feigning interest in his tennis matches and his poker games. I played the role of the devoted, albeit distant wife. Everyone bought it. They saw my change in demeanor as final acceptance, the last stage of my surrender. My daughter Tiffany even commented on it during a phone call. "It's so good to hear you sound like your old self again, Mom," she had said. They had no idea that my old self was gone forever, replaced by a woman they didn't know at all. My submission was a smokescreen. Behind it, I worked with a methodical, silent fury. My life became a series of secret appointments and covert operations. Every 2 weeks, I told Walt I was going to a new water aerobics class for my arthritis. Instead, I drove to Ms. Chen's office downtown. We spent hours going over 40 years of financial records. Walt had been clever. Many of our most valuable assets, our investment portfolios and retirement funds, were structured in a way that gave him primary control. "He's counting on you not knowing how to touch this," Ms. Chen said, tapping a thick file. "He's underestimating you. We'll use that." We began the painstaking process of untangling our financial lives. Following Ms. Chen's advice, I opened a new bank account in my name at a different bank. We began drafting the legal paperwork to liquidate certain joint assets, documents that would require Walt's signature. I would slide them into a stack of ordinary household bills and tax paperwork. "Just some routine papers from our financial advisor, honey," I'd say casually. He'd scribble his signature without a second glance, too engrossed in the football game on TV to care. Each signature was a small victory, another brick in the foundation of my new life. During this time, I also did something for myself. I reconnected with an old friend. His name was Arthur. We had worked together years ago before I retired from the library. He was the library director, a kind, gentle man with a quick wit and a deep love of literature. His wife had passed away from cancer a few years prior, and I knew he had been lonely. I found his number and called him on an impulse just to hear a friendly voice. We started meeting for coffee. It was innocent. We talked about books, our old colleagues, our children. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I wasn't a sick wife or a problem to be managed. I was just Eleanor. Arthur listened. When I finally found the courage to tell him what was happening in my marriage, he didn't offer platitudes or judgment. He simply listened, his eyes filled with a deep, compassionate sadness. He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch gentle, and said, "You deserve so much better." Our friendship deepened. He became my confidant, my only source of sanity in a world that had gone crazy. He was the only one who knew about my plan. He didn't question it. He supported it. He saw my strength when everyone else only saw my weakness. As the months passed, my plan took its final shape. I had a new bank account with a substantial sum of money. I had an attorney ready to file divorce papers at a moment's notice. And I had a friend in Arthur who offered me not a romance, but something far more valuable. A glimpse of a future where I wouldn't be alone, a future where I would be respected. I circled the date on my calendar, the 4th of July. Exactly 1 year since my family had sat me down and sentenced me to a life of humiliation. This year wouldn't be their day of celebration. It would be my Independence Day. The morning of the 4th of July dawned bright and clear. The air was already thick with the smell of cut grass and the distant pop of early firecrackers. Our backyard slowly filled with the same cast of characters as the year before. Tiffany and David, Marcus and Olivia, the grandkids. The grill was fired up, burgers and sausages sizzling. The conversation was light, full of laughter. It was a perfect picture of a happy American family, a perfect lie. I played my part flawlessly. I mingled, I smiled. I complimented Tiffany's potato salad. But this year I made sure to overplay my role. I groaned every time I stood up. I rubbed my hands together as if they were in agony. I let out a small sigh of exhaustion every now and then. I was planting the seeds for my final performance. As evening approached and everyone began gathering coolers and lawn chairs to go watch the fireworks, I found Walt in the kitchen. "Honey," I said, placing a hand on his arm, my voice laden with manufactured fatigue. "I don't think I can make it to the fireworks this year. My joints are killing me. I think I need to head to bed and rest soon." He looked at me with a flash of what I could have sworn was genuine concern. That was the hardest part of all this, knowing that somewhere buried deep beneath the selfishness and betrayal was the man I once loved, a man who could still feel a sliver of affection for me. It made what I was about to do even harder, but no less necessary. "Are you sure, Eleanor?" he asked. "You missed them last year, too." "I'm sure," I said, giving him a weak smile. "I'm getting old. I guess you all go and have a wonderful time for me." He patted my hand. "Okay, if you're sure, get some rest." As soon as he left the room, I watched him walk straight toward Tiffany. A whispered conversation, a quick nod. I knew exactly what was happening. My absence wasn't a problem. It was an invitation. They were making room for Chelsea. The new betrayal, though expected, still stung. One by one, they came to say goodbye, expressing their disappointment that I wasn't going. I hugged my granddaughters, Zoe and Kayla, a little longer than usual. "Be good, my sweet girls," I whispered, my heart aching. This was the only true loss, the only collateral damage of my war that I knew would leave a permanent scar. I stood at the front door and waved as they piled into Tiffany's minivan, their laughter floating back to me on the warm evening breeze. They didn't even look back. The moment the taillights disappeared around the corner, I moved. There was no time for hesitation. My luggage, a single suitcase, was already packed and hidden in the back of my closet. I walked through the house one last time. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing but a quiet, resolved calm. In the bedroom, I removed my wedding ring, the simple gold band I had worn for 40 years. I placed it gently on Walt's pillow. Next to it, I placed a small, inconspicuous thumb drive. I grabbed my purse and my suitcase. I walked out to the garage and got into my car. I didn't look back at the house in the rearview mirror. I was already looking forward. A few blocks away, parked on a quiet side street, Arthur was waiting for me in his car. I pulled up behind him, got out, and put my suitcase into his trunk. I left my own car there, legally parked on the street. They would find it later. I slid into the passenger seat of his car, and he leaned over and took my hand. "Ready?" His voice soft. "I'm ready," I said. And together we drove toward the airport, toward the rest of my life, just as the first bursts of the professional fireworks began to illuminate the night sky behind us. The family got home late, around 10:30. I imagine they were euphoric from the fireworks, still buzzing with holiday joy. Walt probably opened the door, expecting to find the house dark and me asleep in bed. It was Marcus who found it. I learned this later from Olivia. Walt had asked him to go check on me just to make sure I was okay. Marcus walked into the master bedroom. He didn't find me. He found an empty, perfectly made bed, and on his father's pillow, gleaming under the soft light of the bedside lamp, were two small items. My wedding ring and a black thumb drive. A feeling of unease must have run through them. This wasn't right. This wasn't part of the plan. They all gathered in the living room, a confused, anxious cluster. David, being the most tech-savvy, grabbed the thumb drive and plugged it into his laptop. A single video file popped up on the screen. He double-clicked. The screen was black for a moment and then my face appeared. I was in a room they didn't recognize, sitting in a comfortable chair. I looked calm. I looked directly into the camera as if I were looking into each of their eyes. "Hello, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "If I've calculated correctly, you're watching this a little after 10, just after you've returned from the fireworks." I saw them in my mind reflexively check the clock. "At this very moment," I continued, "I am on a plane flying far away from the United States. And in case you're wondering, I'm not coming back." The sound of Walt's gasp, a sharp, choked no, was something I could only imagine, but I knew it was there. "You betrayed me." The woman on the screen said, "The new me," her voice unbroken. "Every single one of you, Walter, my husband of 40 years, a man I built a home for, raised a family with, and stood by through everything. You threw me out like an old rag for a woman half my age, and when I dared to object, you turned my own children against me. I thought 40 years of loyalty, dedication, and fidelity would mean something to you. I deserved better than this. Your desires, and let's be honest, they were whims, not needs, should never have overridden my dignity." I let the words hang in the air for a moment before turning my attention to my children. "Tiffany, your betrayal hurt just as much as your father's. You were always Mom's girl. We did everything together. And to know that you not only supported your father cheating, but actively encouraged it, that you lectured him and me on how to be okay with it, that broke my heart in a way his actions never could." I could imagine her shaking her head, but the truth was there on the screen for her husband to see. "And Marcus, you must be one of the most foolish men in the world. Did you realize that by supporting this, you gave your wife Olivia permission to do the same to you? You told her with your actions that if she ever feels her needs aren't being met, she has the green light to seek satisfaction elsewhere. How does that feel, son?" I watched David look at Tiffany, a new and terrible suspicion dawning in his eyes. I watched Olivia look at Marcus, her face pale. I wasn't just leaving. I was planting seeds of doubt that would grow in the poisoned soil of their betrayal. The family they fought so hard to keep together was already starting to crumble. The video continued. I paused on screen, letting the weight of my words sink in. The atmosphere in that living room must have been thick, heavy with shock and dawning horror. But I wasn't finished. The emotional blows were just the prelude to the main event. I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was disrespected weekly, I said, my voice growing colder, more professional. And I certainly wasn't going to stay when I found out it was happening multiple times a week. Oh yes, Walt. You weren't as discreet as you thought. Inviting her to Mother's Day, that was a special kind of low. I should also mention the financial situation I've left you in. For 40 years, I put this family first. I managed the home, raised the children, and supported Walt's career, allowing him to accumulate our wealth. I've decided it's time I was compensated for my contributions. I leaned forward slightly. Walter, I've left you the house. As you know, it's fully paid off and is worth a considerable amount. My attorney, Ms. Chen, will be in touch to assist you with the sale if you choose to do so. I've also left you $400,000 in the checking account. I calculated that at $10,000 for every good year you gave me. Unfortunately, there haven't been many good years lately. I let that sink in. A generous settlement by any standard, but it was what came next that would change everything for them. As for the rest of our assets, I said, my voice dropping slightly, our investment portfolios, our retirement funds, our savings, I took them. With the help of my attorney, I have secured my half of the marital assets, and then some as compensation for the emotional damage and breach of trust. After everything is settled, I will have a portfolio approaching 8 figures. I'll be perfectly fine, although I doubt any of you genuinely care. The silence in the room must have been absolute. The money, the foundation of their comfortable lives, the source of their security, the future inheritance they all took for granted, was gone. Oh, I added, a small knowing smile playing on my lips. And if you're worried about me spending my golden years alone, don't be. I already have company and he's sitting right next to me on this plane. Arthur, would you like to say hello? A man's face appeared in the frame. It was Arthur. He looked distinguished and kind with warm eyes. He smiled gently at the camera. Hello, he said, his voice quiet and pleasant. I'm Arthur. I'll be helping Eleanor spend what could have been your inheritance. He gave a small wave. I turned back to the camera. Walter, you probably don't remember Arthur, but you've seen him several times at library events. We worked together for over 20 years. He retired early to join me in my new home. We've been close friends this entire time, and we've been keeping each other company for the last few months since I told him what my husband was doing. And the best part? Arthur's needs are simple. Just affection, respect, and good conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. I looked directly into the camera one last time, my gaze holding Walt's through the screen. I loved you, Walt. I loved you from the day we met. I longed to grow old with you. I am so disappointed that your physical desires ruined that for us. For me, for your own sake. I hope she was worth it. Goodbye. And the screen went black. That was the moment. The moment the screen went black and I knew that in that living room miles away, my old life had officially ended. My new life, sitting on that plane next to a good man, had just begun. The weeks that followed my departure were, as I later learned from Olivia, pure chaos. Walt, stripped of his wife and most of his fortune in one swift move, crumbled. He was a man adrift, lost in a sea of his own making. He called my phone incessantly for days, leaving dozens of voicemails that swung wildly between rage, disbelief, and pathetic pleas for forgiveness. I never listened to them. Arthur deleted them for me. The biggest explosion, however, occurred in my daughter Tiffany's marriage. My words in the video had been a direct hit to the fragile trust between her and David. He couldn't look at her without seeing her mother's warning. You gave him a free pass. The accusation hung between them, poisoning the air in their home. They argued constantly. David became suspicious and withdrawn. Tiffany, faced with the potential loss of her own marriage, panicked. The practical solution she had so confidently prescribed for my marriage suddenly didn't seem so practical anymore. Marcus and Olivia were quieter, but the damage was there too. Olivia, who had always been the most reluctant of the group, distanced herself from the family. She was pregnant with their first child, my first grandson, and she didn't want any part of the toxicity. She told Marcus that until he could understand the profound disrespect they had shown me, she needed space. They were all fractured, broken pieces of a family that had once been whole. They had sacrificed my dignity at the altar of Walt's desires, and now they were paying the price. About 3 weeks after I left, I decided to make a call. I didn't call Tiffany or Marcus. I called Olivia. I knew she was the only one who might have a conscience left. She answered on the first ring, her voice cautious. "Hello, Olivia. It's Eleanor," I said quietly. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh, Eleanor, my God, how are you? Where are you?" "I'm fine, honey. I'm safe and I'm well, but I can't tell you where I am right now. How are you?" I'm okay," she said, her voice faltering. "Dad, Walt, he's not doing well. And Tiffany and David are having serious problems." She paused. "Eleanor, I have to tell you, I am so sorry. I knew it was wrong from the start. I should have said something. I was new to the family. I was scared. It's no excuse, but I am so sorry." "Olivia," I said, and I meant it. "I saw it in your eyes that day. You're forgiven." She started crying softly. "Thank you. That means so much, especially because I want both grandmas in my baby's life. I'm pregnant, Eleanor." The news was a ray of sunshine breaking through the storm clouds. A baby, a new beginning. "Oh, honey," I said, my own voice thick with emotion. "What wonderful news. Congratulations." We talked for a little while longer. She told me more about the aftermath, the arguments, and the tears. Before hanging up, I made a request. "Olivia," I said, "I think I'm ready to talk to them. All of them. Can you arrange a call for tomorrow night? But on one condition, Chelsea is not to be there." "Of course, Eleanor," she said without hesitation. "They'll be there." The next night, I sat with Arthur in the living room of our new home, a beautiful little house overlooking the ocean. The phone was on speaker. The call connected to the living room where my old family was gathered. "Hello, Mom. We're all here." Olivia's voice came through a little shaky. "Thank you, Olivia," I said calmly. "Just so you all know, Arthur is with me. I want this to be a civil conversation, not an argument. Do you all agree?" A chorus of murmured agreements came over the speaker. "Good," I began. "I wanted to wait for some time to pass before we spoke." I paused, then addressed my son. "Marcus, congratulations on the baby. I mean that from the heart." "Thanks, Mom." His voice muted. "The best thing you can do for your children is to love their mother," I said softly. "Remember that." Then it was Walt's turn. "Eleanor, sweetheart, please." His voice cracked. "Please come home. We can fix this. I'll end things with Chelsea. I swear. If you had just told me you were really leaving." "I did tell you, Walt," I interrupted. My voice was steady but not cruel. "I told you I wouldn't accept this, but you wouldn't listen. You chose your affair over our marriage. You invited her into our family. There is no fixing this. From the moment you chose her over me, our marriage was over. I am so sorry, but it's done." I could hear him begin to sob, a broken, helpless sound. "And your commitment to me?" he managed to say. "You made that commitment first." "Yes, I did," I replied. "And I would still be honoring it if you hadn't broken yours. When you did, you freed me from my commitment and gave me the opportunity to make a new one, which I have done with Arthur. There's no going back." A heavy silence fell, broken only by Walt's crying. Then Tiffany spoke, her voice cold with anger. "That's rich, Mom. You called just to hurt Dad more. All because your ego couldn't handle another woman making him feel good." "Do you truly see it that way, Tiffany?" I asked calmly. "Let me ask your husband a question. David, how's your ego? Is it ready to accept another man making your wife feel better than you do? Silence. The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Finally, David's voice, strained and forced, came through the speaker. For the record, Eleanor, after all of this, Tiffany and I have been having very serious problems. I understand, I replied. But let me tell you both this. Fight for your marriage. You love each other, but you've started taking it for granted. Let this be a wake-up call, not the end. Remember, you're a team. You're partners. I never wanted this to happen, Mom, Tiffany whispered, her anger gone, replaced by the terrified voice of a little girl. I'm scared. I know, I said softly. But you can fix it. Take the time you used to manage my marriage and use it to manage your own. You are his partner, Tiffany, not his warden. Be honest with him. That's all you can do. There was another long silence. The call had run its course. The things that needed to be said had been said. It's too late for us, honey, I said, my voice gentle. A final farewell to my daughter. But it's not too late for you. I let Arthur disconnect the call. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the large window toward the ocean, the waves rolling in and out, constant and eternal. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and rose. It was beautiful. A chapter of my life, a long and painful one, had finally truly ended. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. I felt peace, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but it was important. If you've ever gone through anything similar, or if my journey has moved you in any way, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Reading your stories and knowing I'm not alone means so much to me. Please take care and know that no matter how dark it gets, there is always a new dawn waiting.